You're gonna get
Try to
the
finish.
best.
Thank you all.
I'm good. Was that you? Yeah.
I know, I know.
We did.
I heard it.
He's like,
Man, almost like you knew what you were doing.
you could resend it.
Thanks for bringing it up.
Well,
Are you ready?
All right, good evening, everyone. I call this meeting to order. Welcome to all the guests. Start out with the approval of the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve.
First,
second.
first and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Was the same. All right, agenda's approved.
All right, so it's that time of year again when we get Hoosier Energy in. I'm gonna let you guys go through, but Dawn and her team, Dawn is the CEO at Hoosier Energy. We are one of 18 members, and so Dawn and her staff make their way around the territory. So we're pleased to have you guys tonight. And if you guys want to just go ahead and introduce yourselves and then go ahead and get started with some slides.
Sure. Thanks so much, Brett, for having us, and thanks to the board of directors. We always enjoy this time of year to come out and share with you a little bit about what's going on at Hoosier Energy, and then also talk about whatever's on your minds. So that's always the most important thing. Here with me this evening is Rob Horton, who is our Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer, and Shannon Tone, who is our Senior Vice President of Member Engagement. So as I always say, these two are here to answer all the tough questions, so make sure you don't disappoint. Ask them some tough questions. But know what we always say is if we don't have the answer tonight to what you ask us, we'll get the answer and we'll get it back to you. So I thought what we'd do this evening is talk a little bit about what's going on in the energy transition from a global, national, regional, state, and then Hoosier Energy perspective. And then just open it up to whatever discussion you'd like to have around that topic, as well as anything else that's on your mind. So one of the things before we dive in, well, it's really good to be together in person with you all, because I know for a while there during COVID, we weren't able to do that. One of the things that has continued to be virtual is that I don't come with a check to return your patronage anymore. So no big checks tonight, unfortunately. But we do continue to return patronage to members, electronic means through wire transfer. And actually, this is the time of year when we would have just distributed that to you for last year's retirement. We actually accelerated that last year and made that return in May rather than waiting till the end of the year. And the board approved doing that as part of the means that we were looking at to help moderate and offset some of the cost increases that we've been seeing. And we'll talk a little bit more about those. But I think for Decatur, we returned to you, I think it was just under $965,000 to you in patronage last year. And in total, across all 18 members, we returned $20 million to members. And we appreciate that's the investment that you have in your G&T. And it's an important part of us being able to return that back to you. So that business has already been taken care of. All right, so let's jump right in. From a global perspective, what's going on from an energy transition standpoint? I wanted to bring up a report that Kroll, and some of you may be familiar with them, they're a risk management and investigation and assessment type of organization. And they look at risk from a global perspective. And last fall, they actually issued a report kind of taking a look at what they perceive to be the highest risk globally and ranked them in terms of the likelihood that the risk could come to bear, and then also just the magnitude if it were to take place. And I think some of the things that they mentioned, the top four, really resonate with what we experience in our industry. They noted that Russia's weaponization of energy in Europe and just the risk that poses. I think we've all seen that play out after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And when people ask me, what keeps me up at night related to work, this is one of the things that is definitely on that list. Because not only have we seen that on an international stage, it also can give bad actors here domestically ideas about how fragile the energy grid really is in some aspects. And so we've seen some attacks on substations across the nation. And so this is definitely something that's on our radar screen. They also mentioned just the food insecurity crisis globally. And when you think about just how much Ukraine and Russia together account for the grain that's traded globally, you can see that that can have a pretty significant impact. So when you think about the crisis that could come from that, what kind of additional geopolitical types of implications could that have for instability worldwide? So that is something that is continuing to be on the radar screen. At the time the report was prepared last fall, China still had not started coming out of its zero COVID policy, which was really having impacts on global supply chains. Now, we've seen China lift that, but that doesn't relieve the pressure overnight. And so we're still seeing the outcome or the outfall of issues around supply chains. And then finally, one of the things that they noted was while energy costs in the US remain well below those in Europe, prices here are rising domestically, and we certainly understand that and know that. So I thought that that was pretty interesting from a global standpoint and just how many of those risks touch on what we deal with every day. When you think about then, what does that mean for the United States? I thought I'd share a series of 3 charts with you that shows in pictures the impact that it's been having on cost here domestically. When we think about the fuels that really underlie the electricity supply in the US, it continues to be natural gas and coal predominantly. Now renewables are gaining, but it's still today coal and gas. When you think about what's happening globally as Europe was trying to and continues to try to move away from Russian supplies of gas and coal, they turned to the United States. And as you know, we've been exporting record numbers of LNG to help fill that gap for Europe. And so the global demand for natural gas has risen significantly. At the same time, gas producers here in the United States are ramping up production in a much more conservative way. And so they're coming off of years prior to COVID of a lot of the fracking of natural gas, which kept prices very low. And so gas investors are saying, look, we want to see some returns on our investments, and we want to be more conservative about how much we put into ramping up production at an accelerated pace. So you can see that increased demand and production that's not keeping pace has driven prices higher here in the US. So when we took a look, the August line, August 2021, the yellow line that's on the lower part of the graph, that's where things were when we were preparing our 5-year business plan a year ago. Fast forward a year to the most recent 5-year business plan that the board approved this past November, and you can see that natural gas prices, the outlook for those was almost 80% higher year over year. If you look at coal, the story is fairly similar. Coal prices year over year, we saw an increase in Illinois Basin coal, which is primarily what's used in this area of the nation, almost 200% higher than where it was. And again, the story there is global demand for coal, because again, Russia was a coal provider. And then also, as far as increasing coal production here in the US, coal mining operations are running into the same issues that other manufacturers and companies are in the US in terms of supply chain issues and labor having to be able to run their operations. So that's keeping prices elevated. So when you think then of coal and natural gas being the primary fuels underlying electricity, it's no surprise that the outlook for forward power prices was up over 125% year over year. So that's the price impact. When we say, all right, well, let's take that down and say, what does it really do for us here at a local basis? And I thought this information might be kind of interesting. We took a look at our average rate to members for 2022. At the time the slide was prepared, our estimate before we closed the books was $78 a megawatt hour. I think we closed the year actually right at $79 a megawatt hour. But when you look at our rate and you kind of set aside $4, that accounts for our cost associated with owning substations, distribution infrastructure to serve you all to a certain point, as well as the services that members have aggregated at Hoosier to provide for you. You can see that $74 of that 78 represent our direct cost of generation, power supply, and transmission operations. When we take a look at the national average, and this was information that was provided by the Energy Information Administration last fall, from a national standpoint across all utilities, including cooperatives, municipals, and investor-owned, that same cost was $86 a megawatt hour. So not that we should feel good about the 78. I think what this shows us, though, is that what we're talking about is not just a Hoosier Energy, a state, a regional issue. It really is a national issue that we're facing across the country. So let's turn from pricing a little bit and talk about reliability. And the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, or NERC for short, prepares a reliability assessment twice a year. They'll prepare one as we head into the summer season, and they'll also prepare one as we head into the winter season. And their most recent report that came out right before the winter season that we're just wrapping up was that their outlook from a national standpoint is that they believe that under normal to mild weather conditions for this winter, they think that the grid has sufficient supply of capacity resources to meet demand. However, they did identify some areas that are vulnerable to extreme and or prolonged cold weather events. And in certain situations, those areas could require load shedding procedures in order to maintain the reliability of the overall grid. And we'll talk in just a minute about the areas that they identified. They also noted, as we headed into the winter, that generators are facing a heightened fuel risk. And that's due to many of the issues that I just mentioned in terms of global energy supply constraints. Also, at the time they were preparing their assessment, we were looking at the possibility of a nationwide rail strike. And fortunately, we were able to avoid that. But that would have had profound impacts, not just for our industry and the transportation of fuel, but just for our overall economy. And then finally, they noted that natural gas pipeline infrastructure continues to be really tight. As we as a nation rely more and more on natural gas, the expansion of our natural gas pipeline infrastructure hasn't kept pace with that necessarily, and wasn't necessarily designed to transport gas the way we are today. So the next slide shows those areas of North America that NERC identified as at risk for the potential for load shed events during peak conditions. And it's no surprise that Texas continues to be on the radar screen. And I know that in the past, we talked about the situation back in February of 2021 when Texas had prolonged cold weather and actually had sustained load shed events across the state. So Texas has made some changes to its power market, but it hasn't necessarily fixed all of the fundamental issues that gave problems to the state back in 2021. In the southeastern part of the nation, it's really kind of a similar story like Texas. There are parts of the southern U.S. that could find themselves in an issue and experience high generator outages. At the same time, they would have high demand during cold weather. So when we think about Indiana, we're used to having hot summers and cold winters. So we winterize our generating units here in the Midwest. Well, in warmer parts of the country, that's not necessarily the case. They don't go to that same level. And so as the weather gets colder, they could see issues there. And then in New England, the issues really are around the capacity of the natural gas transportation infrastructure to be able to deliver enough fuel when needed, because New England relies predominantly on natural gas for its generation. And then finally, I want to talk about MISO, which is in the center part of the map, and it's where we're situated. So with respect to MISO in particular, NERC noted that reserve margins, which think of that as the extra generation that is sitting there and available in extreme circumstances to meet unexpected events. Those reserve margins have fallen, and year over year, as we headed into this winter, the reserve margin was 7% lower than it was a year before. And that's a result of continued load growth across the 15-state footprint in MISO, as well as generation retirements. So the buffer for unexpected events is becoming more narrow now. And so NERC noted that during extreme cold weather events, that would extend deep into MISO's southern area. And so we're considered to be in MISO North. MISO South, think of that as kind of that Louisiana, Arkansas, parts of Texas area, that could lead to a situation where there might need to be some controlled load shedding in order to avoid more broader outages on the grid. MISO in response said that they expected to maintain reliability by first calling on load modifying resources, and think of those as large commercial and industrial loads that have agreed in advance to reduce their load on the grid in events of emergency types of situations. So they would first call on those resources to reduce their load. MISO would also look for non-firm transfers into the system. So situated just east of MISO is another multi-state power market known as PJM. There's physical capability to transfer power back and forth between MISO and PJM. And to the west, there's SPP, which is another region where power can be transferred back and forth. And then also, MISO would look at transferring between its north and south regions to the extent possible. And we actually saw MISO really put this plan into effect right before the Christmas holiday. When you recall, temperatures got really, really cold across the US, definitely across the footprint. And we actually started receiving some alerts from MISO in terms of generation getting very tight. And what we did see was MISO call on those load modifying resources. We saw that load come down, and we saw the system overall, the footprint stabilize more. And so it was kind of a short-lived type of event to watch for. So we actually saw them put their plan into practice. MISO also continues to coordinate with its members on their winter preparations as far as fuel supplies and how sufficient their coal inventories, as an example, are. And so they were watching that and assessing what the risk was overall to generation availability. So turning from MISO then, let's focus on some state energy policies. So I think I've shared with you in the past that I was fortunate enough to be a member of the state's 21st Century Energy Policy Development Task Force, which was in place for 4 years. And we actually completed our work late last year and presented our final recommendations to the General Assembly and the governor. And when I think of Indiana's approach towards energy policy, I always say, I think we're doing it right. We're doing it about as well as you can. And why I say that is that when you look at the way Indiana is approaching things, we recognize that here in Indiana that renewable resources are going to continue to grow, and the state is actually encouraging that. However, and I included a quote here because I think it says a lot, transition to an increased reliance on renewable energy resources must be managed in a way that doesn't compromise the reliability, resiliency, and stability of electric utility service, and that maintains affordability for all customer classes. And when you hear that, it sounds an awfully lot like what we're about as cooperatives when we talk about affordable, reliable, sustainable energy. And so does this mean that as bills have been introduced during this most recent legislative session that we love everything that's been introduced? No, not at all. But I do think that we're starting out with the right intentions. When bills get introduced, rather than balancing all of these at one time, oftentimes you get an interest that only cares about one of the pillars. And that's where you have to make sure that the state keeps our balance in mind. But I think we're doing pretty well. In Illinois, in contrast, because we have a member system located in Illinois, and we also have generating resources that are located in the state of Illinois. I think I've shared with you in the past that Illinois passed comprehensive energy legislation back in 2021 that calls for the closure of all coal generation in the state of Illinois by 2030 for investor-owned utilities, and by 2045 for cooperatives. And it also calls for the phase out of all natural gas generation in the state of Illinois over a similar time period. Illinois' governor has come out to say that Illinois is going to be looking to import power from other states. And so while Indiana is focused on, let's make sure we have enough resources here in the state and we look at things from a balance standpoint, Illinois has the primary priority of looking at greenhouse gas emission reductions and not so much on the reliability and affordability side. So it's a very stark contrast. So let's talk a little bit then about our resource portfolio transition. And since we were together a year ago having a conversation, as you're aware, we've transferred the ownership of the Merom Generating Station to Hallador. And that is a transaction that will bring benefits to member systems. It also benefits the local community where the plant is located. It's beneficial to the state in terms of maintaining tax base in the state as well. And to MISO, because while we were on a path to actually stop operating Merom this year, Hallador plans to continue to operate Merom into the future. And so that provides a generation resources as margins are tightening that will be in the mix for longer. Why is it beneficial to us? It transfers costs that members would bear into the future for decommissioning of the plant over to Hallador. So it'll bring real cost savings to members. It also is beneficial in terms of we will continue to buy power from the Merom station from Hallador through 2025, which is longer than we had planned for initially. And that gives us a little bit more time to transition our portfolio. We can step away from Merom more gradually rather than all at once. And so you ask, how can Hallador make the operation of Merom more cost effective than Hoosier could? And the answer ties to the fact that Hallador owns the coal that will supply the plant. And so rather than us having to buy the coal in the wholesale market at the prices that I shared with you earlier, Hallador can supply the plant at the cost of coal production, which is a fraction of that. So it really is one of those transactions that is a win for multiple parties, I believe. As we started working to replace Merom in our portfolio, once we made the decision back in early 2020 to move away from it, we started working on filling in replacement resources. And we have all of our capacity requirements substantially in place through 2025. And we're actively working on shoring up 2026 and beyond. So that's an ongoing process for us. And I think we're making really good progress there. But it isn't easy because as we're trying to build our new portfolio, the MISO market rules keep changing. And some of the things I think that MISO is changing are good in terms of providing for adequate resources and reliability into the future. But there's a lot of uncertainty as they roll out new rules. So a couple of things that they're doing, they're increasing the reserve requirements that we have to bring to the market to serve our load. So they're trying to improve that low reserve margin level, which again, I think is a good thing from a reliability standpoint. They're also looking at how they give credit to generation that comes to the market. So if you think about it, a natural gas generating unit has very different capabilities and characteristics than a solar installation would have. And so they're working on making sure that the accreditation is appropriate and that we have the generation that we need every season of the year and not just for the hottest summer day. So I think all of that is a good thing to be working on. I would argue it's come a few years too late. It would have been very helpful if they had started this a few years ago, but it's where we are. Also, as we think about our resource portfolio, we continue to see more and more member consumer interest from year-end and distributed energy opportunities. There are a number of companies that are looking to fulfill their own environmental, social, and governance metrics, ESG metrics, as well as external pressures that they may have from their customers to have more green electricity supply in their operations. And so more renewables are becoming part of our resource planning considerations. Again, focusing on resource adequacy, reliability, first and foremost, but incorporating renewables when it makes sense for us as well. And so it wouldn't be a meeting with you if I didn't end on a rate outlook chart. And so let's do that. So as we prepared our business plan, as I mentioned back in November, the board approved it. We're looking at average all-in rates increasing year over year by 5% in 2023. And I do want to point out that that includes a special bill credit of $8 million, or the equivalent of about $4 a megawatt hour that is being returned to members in this first quarter of this year. And so as part of the board's ongoing consideration of cost increases and how we can work with members to smooth that and mitigate that as much as we can, we noticed that we were going to see a more significant increase in our tracker rate to you all to take into consideration our fuel cost and power cost during this first quarter, at the same time where winter usage is exceptionally higher than other times of the year. So the board looked at our expected financial results for 2022 and decided to take $8 million out of our 2022 revenues and return it as a credit to members to smooth that during the first quarter. And so that was one of the mitigations that we've taken this year already. And so the outlook over the next few years, you can see it looks like good news or better news after 2023. However, I would say that these forecasts, I always say they have uncertainty in them in the later years. But I think even in the near term, just given the underlying drivers of what's causing the increases and the uncertainty around those, including the ongoing war in Europe and its impact, the continued fuel supply constraints, and just how volatile that's making fuel and power prices, that there's more uncertainty in these forecasts than probably we've ever seen since I've been with Hoosier. But we continue to look at these, and we'll continue to share information with members as soon as we see things changing. So it'll be an ongoing conversation. I also think when we look at some of the forecasts that would show, if you think back at the commodity slides for coal and purchased power, natural gas that we looked at earlier on, it looked like they kind of spiked early this year and then improved. I take that a little bit with a grain of salt for these same reasons. That's what the forecasts look like. But when you think about the drivers that are causing the increases, there's no short-term fixes for those. So to bring on more generation is going to take time. Even if the war in Europe were to end tomorrow, Europe's not going back to Russia for its fuel supplies. And so that's why I tend to be a little bit more skeptical about the outlook. So with that, I know that doesn't seem like a lot of uplifting, cheerful news, but it's important developments. It's the real things that are going on in our business, going on globally, and how they're impacting us here locally. So with that, let me just open it up for whatever conversation you would like to have around any of that or anything else on your minds.
Is there an opportunity for us to build a power plant with some leftover stuff from Illinois after they close all their power? Tell them, fine, it's gonna power right next door.
Question.
That is a good question. Actually, we are looking at opportunities out there in the outer years as we have those opening positions in our portfolio. The interesting part of that conversation is if we all made the decision right now, we wanted to build a power plant, whether it be, well, coal's not really on the table, but if it was natural gas, or if you were going to head down the path of combined cycle, larger natural gas, you're probably looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to 8 to 9 years before it was actually in production. So one of the things that we're tackling right now is taking a look at where are these open positions and how do you back into a schedule? And then how do you pick that technology, right? If Illinois is going to put that kind of pressure on their natural gas systems in 2045 for co-ops and even sooner for the IOUs, you want to make sure that you don't build something so large that you have that stranded cost if someone else were to make a similar decision. So right now, it looks like natural gas is providing that bridge as we get through the transition, but we believe that natural gas is going to be around for a number of years. So we'll be taking a look at those used parts by the time we get out there in the forest.
Figure if they're shutting everything down, all that lot of stuff.
Fires.
Sale.
Yeah.
But we also have generating assets in the state of Illinois. So,
Get them to Indiana, right?
yeah,
Rob, I don't know if you can hit on just kind of where are utility scale batteries? I know that's part of your guys' portfolio as far as looking into the future. Can you give us some insight into where that's at as far as cost and
Sure.
technology is?
There's a lot of technologies out there. We're doing a project with a group referred to as DeLorean to take a look at some smaller options that have some federal funding, some grants behind that. And that's an opportunity to utilize the grants to be able to learn about some of the new technologies. Because right now, as you're seeing the lithium ions that are kind of have been out there for a little while, and you hear some of those being in practice and in play, they're still really costly on a per kilowatt hour kind of standpoint. And as those systems have been in operation for a number of years now, they're starting to see different kind of value streams off different kind of battery technology. So we're keeping pretty close eye on where that's headed. But the project we're working with DeLorean on gives us a couple different avenues to where we can be part of the operations of that. So we can continue to learn on which technology is the best one. Who's going to win out, right, on the battery front.
And Brett, to your point, when we took a look at adopted our new resource plan in early 2020, storage was part of that, but we didn't really include any thoughts around storage until literally this was 2030, because we certainly don't want to be on the bleeding edge of that. We want to learn from others before we start investing. So that's a great question.
Don't want serial number one.
no.
I think it was earlier today that I had heard on the news that Duke and AES are going to be lowering their rates about 16 cent, or that's what they're going to be asking for. I don't know if you've heard that or not. But how impactful is that to Hoosier? I mean, because we're going to hear from our members, well, why can't we do that as well?
Yeah, that's an important discussion to have, because if you look back, it gets very confusing when you hear things in the newspaper, because percentages are thrown out there. And so what I would share is that Duke's increases and others' increases were much more dramatic than ours over time. So when they say they're reducing them by 16%, they were starting from much higher than we were. Because the way we approach it is we're all subject to the same cost. Actually, I think Duke had more cost pressures than we did because they didn't go out and hedge those prices as much as we had. We're pretty conservative about that. But they raised their rates much, much higher. And we try to do it by being more stable. We smooth things over a year. And, that's the way we look at things. So that 16% is very misleading because they're far above where we are right now.
They raised the prices 50%, and now they're back in another 16. We didn't jack them up to start.
I mean, they had multiple quarters of double-digit increases building up to that. Yeah.
Over the long term, we have some PPA arrangements with Duke where if their fuel costs do come down, that we will benefit from that because those are some cost-based PPAs, correct?
Correct. You're correct.
Shannon, I got one for you.
Right.
Can you kind of go over the economic development situation in the state and what we've been reading about and how we think that we might be able to handle that forward?
I'll give it a shot.
Okay.
And Donna and Rob will correct me if I'm wrong. So realistically, the economic development challenge has been, we are seeing more and more and more very large loads looking to locate in the area. We had a discussion with the board and with others about growth. Organic growth is just, your normal residential load and some 1 and 2 and 5 megawatt loads that are coming on. We call that organic growth. And all the cooperatives have seen those kind of things over the years. But what we're starting to see is 5 megawatt loads, 50, 100, 300, 400, all in one place, which is very challenging in a time where we're talking about capacity is at a premium. And not only do they want 300 or 400 megawatts of capacity, they want it to be, they can't be interrupted. It's got to be on 100% of the time. And oh yeah, we want it to be 100% green too. So nothing like asking for the impossible, right? So we're going through the process of we took a step back, trying to identify exactly, here's kind of what we've been practicing in, but we want an official strategy. Here's how we're going to move forward. And then we want to communicate those challenges that we've talked about here just now with the stakeholders, with the lawmakers, with the economic development group at the state, with your big loads, your potential customers, with your local economic development folks. They all need to be able to see the big picture, because the economic development folks at the local level, even at the state level, the answer has always been yes. We've got a request for a new load in your industrial park. They don't even come talk to the utility. The utility's going to say, yes, they can do it. They'll figure out how to do it. Just, time and money.
That's what I got out of the board meeting the other day.
Yeah.
That the policy had been, yes.
Right.
Then we figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
But now it's, we're maybe.
And this last 2 years they weren't wrong. We had said yes, right? The last 2 years has been, wait a minute, we've always said yes, but wait a minute. Where are we going to get that? How's this going to work? So there's been a lot of questions, and the answer is really still yes, or how do we get to yes? In a strategic way, in a predetermined method. And we still want to be able to say yes under these conditions. And if that particular load is not okay with those conditions, then it's okay that it's a no, but they chose that.
But it seems like there's a disconnect at the state level and the economic development folks promoting all this and trying to get all this investment in Indiana and all these new projects without really a thought of how that's going to be delivered or executed.
There's some lack of communication between the lawmakers and the economic development group that's going out working to attract the load. And we're working on some large communication strategies to make sure that we get the word out consistently from everyone to all those stakeholders. So initially it's going to be, this is a co-op message. We're working with Wabash Valley together to develop that. And we want to take that to the lawmakers and to IEDC and your local economic development folks. But we also want to talk to the investor owns and say, can this be a full utility? This is how the electric utilities feel about this, not just the co-ops, because we're all facing the same capacity issues. The big difference is the investor owns are in it to make $1. So if they can spend $10 million and make that back and make more, they're much more willing to take some risks, I guess, than the co-ops are in general. So a lot going on there.
I was going to say, with what you're talking about with the economic development, along with Illinois, I assume we are looking at the idea of potentially adding a power plant or two as Miriam comes offline and Illinois shuts everything down. Because it just sounds like there's opportunity there based off.
But as he indicated, and we talked, that's a very long process.
Yes.
But we still do have our own part of, or one of the interconnects at the Miriam facility, which is important piece in all that, right?
Absolutely is. The best way to summarize that is our new portfolio, instead of having 1,000 megawatts on one fuel source on 2 shafts, get to that smaller bite-sized piece, right? So we have to fill two buckets. There's a capacity side and an energy side. And the capacity is how I view it is the power plants or the solar farms or the windmills or whatever generating resource it is. And we're looking at different ways to do that. We're trying to pick up 150 megawatts here off of maybe natural gas, lining it up with the seasonal construct. Because if you can do the capacity side on natural gas, the energy portion off of solar is, I'm going to use the term, less expensive. So you want to fill your capacity bucket with something that'll be there that covers the seasons, but maybe buy some energy for those non-dispatchable resources.
You need to have the gas plant to turn on when the sun ain't shining.
You're right on. And we're going to take advantage of our interconnections that we have and the existing ones at Miriam, when Miriam closes up, we don't know when that time is going to come. But that's why we're starting so early now, having the conversations as an engineering group and as internal to Hoosier to say, what technology is next? How long is it going to take? How do you back into that schedule?
And we won't be putting them in Illinois either, will we?
And yes, and probably not build it in Illinois. But you also have to consider, you want to be part of, there's consortiums out there, lots of, call it 7 or 8 co-ops, both from Illinois and Indiana, that are saying, what are the opportunities to where we could build a larger plant? I say we as a collective consortium of people, and then and maybe Hoosier only take 200 megawatts off of that.
Because we have something like that with Wabash Valley already, right?
With our Holland facility, it's a nothing plant, it's a 635 megawatt, and that's split down the half. And
So there's an opportunity there maybe to build something with them for the whole state of Indiana. That we could say, hey, I assume the government is willing to work with us as much as anybody.
Indiana is a very friendly
Yes,
state in
Indiana
terms of that, because of the pillars that I mentioned that Indiana is interested in. Now, Indiana is limiting actually the amount further that utilities in the state can rely on the market to meet those capacity needs that Rob mentioned. It was just, a couple of years ago, they established, we can't rely on that market for any more than 30%. There's a bill headed to Governor Holcomb's desk that we expect him to sign that's going to reduce that to 15%. So that shows Indiana's interest in making sure that you either own generation or you can point to a contract to generation that's going to serve load. So they're very focused on that.
I've met with some state lawmakers that have said, why isn't Hoosier building anything? Why doesn't Hoosier have permits and start putting steel in the ground right now? And kind of goes back to that disconnect we were talking about, right? But the real answer is, one, it takes a lot of time and there's a lot of uncertainty. Yeah, it's going to be natural gas, but nobody wants to take that initial jump, especially if you're going to finance it over 30 years. And one of the questions I asked lawmakers are you going to guarantee us that it won't get closed down in 15? Because if you can guarantee
They will sign on the dotted line with us, it wouldn't matter.
right. And if they're not, and you can, let's say we decided to do that, but we're only going to do it, finance it and depreciate it over 15. Well, that causes your rates to go up and it's a really difficult time to consider that, but we're in that bridging area and that's why it's a transition, right?
Risk versus rewarding.
Yeah.
Don, on capital credits from a finance standpoint, this board their strategy has been to really give back. In fact, last year and in this year's budget, we're giving back record breaking. I mean, more than we ever have from a capital credit standpoint. And obviously that's financed by when you guys retire. When we get it from you, we give it back to the members. And so is there anything that indicates that changes in the near future at all?
No, that's a good question. So last year, as I mentioned, we returned 20 million across all members. And that was called about 1/3 your scheduled patronage return. And about 2/3 of that was special early return, right? To help mitigate the cost increases. And 20 million is the maximum that we could return under our debt agreements, right? So that was unusual circumstances. What I think our long-term plan has been and what I expect us to continue to do, subject to board approval, is that we're going to continue with our scheduled retirements, which are approximately 6.5 million across all 18 members a year, and then look to add another 7 million in special to that. So on an ongoing basis, our plan would be for a total of about 13.5 million a year for members. Again, subject to annual review by the board, but that's in our plans. And we still, as far as I look at it today, that's still the plan that we would continue to do into the future.
What other questions do we have?
Based off what you said, you expect the next, say, 3 to 5 years to really probably not be too challenging from a capacity standpoint with Merom and a bunch of the other stuff. But as Illinois and all the other coal plants that are reaching their end of their lives in the next 10 years or so. I mean, even if we started today, you said, what, it's going to take 6 years to,
Yeah,
what is is there like a 5-year window in there where things are going to get kind of changed?
that's a really good question. And if we can figure that out, that would be awesome. We'll say, you're up against, it's referred to as the MISO Cube. It's the amount of projects that are inside of MISO that are planning to be built. And right now, the vast majority of those projects are solar. So while we've been successful getting our capacity needs through 2025, really shored up, we're in a really good position there on capacity. Our last request for proposals started focusing on that 26 to 30 and beyond timeframe. And that's why you hear these consortiums happening, people getting together and saying, when are we going to build? Everybody's trying to plan for what that looks like. So at some point in time, whether it be in Indiana or Illinois, I think you're going to see some gas plants being constructed. And it may be a group of folks, it may be the IOUs, it may be someone who wants to go out on their own, but that's going to start relieving some of that pressure. It's all going to come down to what happens with supply chain, what happens with liquefied natural gas leaving the country. What are those are big pressures on a new build of a natural gas plant. So you're going to see some volatility around that, but somewhere you'll see some generation being constructed. But you're right, for the next few years, we're filling our portfolio. Things are going okay on the capacity side. We're really going to start focusing on energy again here in the next, well, we've been focusing on it for 6 months, but bringing some things forward in the next month or two. It's going to be a long transition. I don't think we're going to be done with this in 5 years. I think you're talking about, 10's probably being conservative. I think you're really talking about a 10 to 15 year before you look back and say we've transitioned into what the future generation looks like.
Things are going to be tight for the next several years, from the broader market perspective, for sure.
And getting the gas. I mean, just getting the gas physically to the plant now is a problem. And now, there's the power day doesn't align with the gas day. And those folks are all working on that kind of stuff. But, when it gets cold in the wintertime,
That was the issue of the Christmas summer.
Yeah.
Couldn't get the gas.
when it gets cold in the wintertime, the gas goes to Chicago first. So that causes some challenges on the.
Think with them not letting any CO2 emissions, they'd shut that off first.
Thank you guys so much for coming in. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Always.
Thank you.
Oh.
Travis.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care.
Have a good rest of your meeting.
Take care. Safe travels home.
Thank you.
Oh, God.
Sounds like it. Done right? It's not.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks.
Somebody else grab it.
I'm leaving 11:30 whether we're done or not.
In our area.
Okay.
That's because the time it's raining.
Later.
Generator raining. I said, it's gonna be too late. And I'm like,
Absolutely.
Do you have mine?
We got one down.
Uh,
Do you have mine?
your cup. I noticed there were several extra.
It didn't have a heater. And we can understand what.
Not gonna reach it for a long time.
I'd rather not come to rain, but if that's what happened with it.
So we have it, it's big.
Yeah.
I was just, yeah. But thanks. Hey.
Now we'll do it for
Yeah. Always made that noise, you just didn't know it today.
There's a lot of things like that.
Better be careful. Words that come breath.
Now you gotta tell me.
No.
Run the rest. I'll go. It's like.
Okay. Or they plan on feeding wood change.
Budge. Say how the way, how the way.
Let's be.
Five cents or 94, so 94, charging Illinois at 4% stupidity fee. Bills, plan on the line, charging one at 4% stupidity fee. That's what it was, so.
All right, let's continue on. We'll go into agenda item for your information. Who's got questions?
The credit card charges, the Aclara Connect Conference, it's 3,700. What's the summary of what is that for? Just a quick
It's
summary.
4 people going to the Aclara conference, which is our AMI, our meter reading system.
The new,
Same company, but it's what we
Okay.
use currently.
The IT supplies purchase for $6,400 on American Express, how long, I know it's supplies, but is that 6 months, Crystal, or Brett, or Matt, is that, how long are those supplies gonna last us? Is that a? It's on the first page, middle of the first page, $6,400.
the HP store, would that be computers?
Yeah, because I think he just purchased 4 new,
He's got several
Replacement.
right now he's working
because they're all lined up on his desk.
on. Yeah.
I can find out if you want me to find out the exact
That's fine.
equipment under that.
You okay with that?
My guess is it's just the stuff that's in the budget from a life cycle management. I know we had some computers. I think we're through pretty much the iPads. I
Yeah,
think there's some, if you want, I can get it.
I'm good.
and it might be a service contract or something like that too.
Just to clarify that all the nominating committee members have been Brian getting his,
Yes.
have they, everything's clear on everybody.
I think so. Of course, it's included what we voted on last month, and then what was voted on online is included in the email board action.
Okay, so
And it's got everybody's approval. If
I
you
didn't want to know if I had to call some more people.
think you're good.
On the check register, Laura's helping hand, the fee we're paying, is that a weekly, is that a monthly, is that that I see on the check register?
We pay them weekly, so.
Okay, that's a weekly fee.
This is where to ask for anything. It's, speaking of the nominating committee, Brett, you and I had some important back and forth. Did they get, the nominating committee get paid for that meeting?
No, not yet. We were waiting for guidance on you for that. So I thought that was in your hands.
Yes. There is-
Aaron had asked you a few questions because I was just asking for, do I have the approval through the policy to pay these folks? Because there is a policy on it. There's a policy that says a per diem for $100.
Correct.
And so Aaron sent you some questions and I don't want to pay anything that I'm not authorized to pay. So I think it was in your court as far as where that needs to go. And I can get to the email if you want afterward or the.
The last email I got her pertaining to this was actually addressed to you, copy on 15th of this month.
But the questions, I wasn't there, so I can't answer the questions.
All right.
So Clay needs to get back there and.
I think.
Okay.
I mean, I have an authorizing policy to be able to pay him, but she had some questions to Clay, and Clay's the chairman, so.
$25,000 rebate to Jennings County Schools.
It's probably a lighting project.
Do you know what school? Sand Creek, probably?
Yep, it was. They did a lighting rebate with Hoosier.
What else? Anybody have anything else? No other questions? All right, we'll go into the next item. I need Brian here probably, but if everybody can go ahead and look into previous meeting minutes. There, was that, when did that revision?
Jeannie found some grammar.
Okay,
I found one as well, rescind versus rescind.
Yeah, she's got that.
Okay.
And then Carl, we put in there that previously we thought we needed something in there for that. So we added that for Ann Reiner.
all right, I need a motion for approval.
So moved with corrections noted,
With revision two.
with revision 2, yeah.
I'll second.
We have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, the same. Motion passes. All right, Brad, safety minute, full moment.
Do this from my seat. Couple cool moments. We did a project for an individual. You can read it up there. Hello, Pat is just a kind of an attaboy for Pat, Brian, and the team. They're pleased with the job, so you don't every day get emails from members to our inbox. Second thing, if you read Brett's Buzz last month, we highlighted all the things that we got done last year and kind of where we stand. So we got a text basically saying, keep it up. So I thought that was kind of cool. Anytime you get attaboys. Safety minute, as you all know, it's tornado season. So March 20th was the tornado drill statewide. Again, if we're in this room, it seems like we always get weather when we're together in here too sometimes. So if we are, follow us. We'll go to the restroom here or vault, or there's a couple different restrooms. Main thing is just follow us. I thought it was kind of interesting. My kids always talk about what's the difference between a watch and a warning. And I always get them messed up too. I'm like, okay, I don't know which one is which, right? So as you can see, warning's a little bit more, it's going to happen, take action. A watch is just kind of be prepared. There's conditions that are favorable. So I thought that was something.
Good, thank you. Next item is really for your information, unless anybody has any comments or questions based upon the output that's included there, but it does include those locations, I guess, that received grants, I guess, on February 21st.
Yeah, next week they're doing kind of like a breakfast thing. They'll bring in the newspaper and they give them the real big checks, present them to them. So kind of a cool event.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice that you can do that. Anybody have any questions on that then? All right, so the next item is the CEO update, Brad.
Yeah, so a few projects, few kind of updates of things going on, just to kind of keep everybody in tune. So as we talk about Accord, I know we had spoke about this prior. There was a lot of questions and a lot of information that we didn't have to provide. And so a lot of that stuff has been generated. At that point in time, they didn't even have the grant. So the grant was supposed to be awarded last week to Accord. In other words, it's a 50% grant. So it was supposed to be awarded last week. I also know Jackson had a grant through the same middle mile grant program and they haven't heard anything. So look for that to come. If it does come and it's something that we think is something that we want to present to the board, we may have to get together prior to a board meeting. I just want to let everybody know kind of where that's at right now. It was supposed to be awarded last month last week, and it hasn't been yet. So we haven't heard anything.
So this is what we previously addressed and declined.
Correct.
And it's now circled back up.
He wanted to give us the opportunity to take a look at the business plan because we submitted all the questions that y'all had, which were really good questions that we didn't have answers to. So we submitted those all to them. Accord's already been working on all those types of things anyway. So the other big question when we first talked about this was we didn't know if they were going to get this grant or not, right? Because that's the difference between getting it for 50 cents on the dollar compared to paying full price. That's a big what if, in my opinion. So depending on if they get that and the business case looks like something that management thinks we want to present to the board, if that's the case, then we're going to bring it to you guys and just show you all the data that we had previously talked about to see if it's something that we want to even entertain.
Mr. Chairman, I would respectfully request that definitely needs to be on agenda in the future with the interest we had in this room months ago. I don't want to have to tell them, the membership, that we decided against it again.
Okay.
So I would request that we have that option on a future agenda for that to be discussed. Because I know that's a hot topic with our membership.
And I don't know how quickly this will come about. Like I said, it may be something that we would need to get together
As a sport, as a special.
as a special meeting, or I don't know. I'm just making you aware at this point that the grant has been delayed. I think the state's kind of behind on these middle mile grants, so. Any other questions on that one? Another thing that's come up, so Sam has been actively working on just looking for grants, just monitoring them. The Indiana Fiber Grant is, they're saying now mid next month, going to come up. This isn't a middle mile. This is open for anyone. At this point, we don't know what the requirements are, so I can't sit here and say it's something that we definitely want to do, but Sam is working on recommending a partner for that. We did work with NRTC there for a while. He's looking for who that partner might be, to use our previous feasibility study to sort of grade according to what the requirements are to see if it's something that we think we could get and we could get some dollars for, and then obviously a quote for writing any type of grants. So that is coming up mid next month. We did meet, and this is just an overall broadband type update, but we did meet with Great Plains a couple of weeks ago, learned a little bit about it. The main thing there to keep in mind for us here is that ETC, when it was sold through private equity at Great Plains. Private, I mean, there's a reason why they don't have wireless anymore, right? They shut all their wireless because they weren't making any money on it. So it's owned by private equity. So any opportunities that we looked at previously with ETC, in other words, they were like 5-year payback type deals for them, are probably more like 1 to 2 year now. It's private equity owned. So I didn't get any good feelings from the conversation that there's going to be any type of partnership that might work there. We are still going to have conversations though. Second thing is we did meet with, Sam met with Connexus yesterday, I believe, on some partnership opportunities. They have some unique opportunities there that Sam thinks we need to dig into. So we're working with Connexus. Connexus is one of the big, like NRTCs, right? They can do the grant work. They can even do build and things like that. So that is someone that Sam has continued to work with. Sam's this project. I wanted to talk about kind of an update to a strategy. We just got some numbers and things, so kind of wanted to get some board input on this. But when it comes to fiber companies attaching to our poles, we have 7 contracts in place today. We invoiced for those in October. It equates to about $95,000. We are on the second year. So last year was our first year. This is our second year of a 5-year plan to re-inventory. So obviously everyone doesn't always tell you when they attach, right? So we have contracts out there. We are getting paid for the contracts that we have out there, but some folks don't tell you and they attach to your pole. So every so often you have to do this inventory thing. So what you guys agreed to was last year was our first year of when we go out and test the poles, they're noting any type of contacts, and that information is getting put into our mapping system so that at the end of 5 years, we'll propose a project to the board that says, let's look at our mapping data where these attachments are compared to the contracts that we have in place, and anything that's a discrepancy, we need to go negotiate and create contracts for. So I just wanted to tee this up for the board as far as that strategy, we're still moving on in that strategy, and I just kind of wanted to get a conversation from the board as far as, does that still work? It was in the budget this year. We had planned for it this year. When we do pole testing, that's kind of the idea. But I wanted to get the board to confirm that we want to keep going forward on this strategy, essentially.
What do you think?
I definitely support it.
Why wouldn't we?
I wouldn't wait 5 years to renew contracts either if you find that they have more attachments each year than what they're paying.
Yeah, it gets tricky because we're doing these by line circuit. And so I think your point is can we look at the contracts to see where those are at compared to? That's a possibility, actually. Don't wait for 5 years. We could look into that, definitely. There was some numbers on this. We had 40, so there's roughly right around 4,700 polls per year in this 5-year plan. So if you guys remember, we brought the idea of let's go do an inventory project, and it's just over $100,000 project. It's very expensive for bringing in very, very little possible revenue. So we decided not to do that, to do the 5-year plan. But out of the 40, so it's like 4,700 polls per year, which is the exact ones that we're actually doing the testing on. 309 were found to have those attachments. So. All right, any other questions or comments on that? The 2022 red tag pole replacements being done this year, so that's the 330 roughly, I think number was. We do have 60 poles on site out at our layout yard, 60 plus, I'd say. We are waiting on the rest of the materials. It's supposed to be either tomorrow or the beginning of next week to get a lot of those other materials. Obviously, we're gonna need some more poles too. I don't know if you've seen the back inventory back here. You can see it from 46. We've upped our inventory pretty majorly because these are really hard to come by as far as poles, wires, and transformers. So anyway, we have our contractor already working on the New Point project. So we want to get that one finished up obviously first and then get all the materials on site and kick off replacing those 2023, which is primarily the Westport area, if you noticed. And then tree refusal progress. So this has ramped up a bit. There's quite a few of them. I've actually got some numbers. So 12 of them have been escalated to Pat and I. Pat and I's plan is to take a little bit of time tomorrow and beginning of next week to go visit these members. There's 21 in staking and metering department. What that means is the members asking for opportunities or costs to go underground to not have to cut trees. So there's 21 of them in there. There's 5 in our tree contractor's hands, and then there's 3 waiting on members. So there is some progress being done. We actually are getting members to call in and to work through the escalations that we get on those. So, questions on anything so far? I'm gonna go over can we keep going? Sure. All right, so February, as you all know, is pretty warm. It's actually 14% warmer than our 5-year average. You can see it right here. That's quite a bit. For February is usually a pretty heavy month. And then you can even see it in our HDD. So this is heating degree days. This is our 5-year average. This is where we were for February this year. 584 compared to 904. So big difference. It was pretty warm. And it also shows up in our KWH from Hoosier. So you can see our 5-year average right here. We ended the month at about 28 million KWH, which is about 8.1% less than our 5-year average. Same thing with our demand. 5-year average is right here. Here we are right here. It was about an 6.6% lower than our 5-year average. So again, this has been the same story with the weather we've had. So the total picture of this, we started the year in January about 8.5% under our budget in sales as far as KWH. We ended this month we lost some ground, obviously with February. We're about minus 10%. You can see really the only thing that's keeping us afloat is transmission, and they lost a little bit from this month. Residential's way down, which makes sense, right? The HDD is down, which means people aren't running heaters and air conditioners. And then if you break it out by to budget, you can see again, transmission is the only one that's really positive. Same story really in February, it's kind of January. There was really no major storms in February, good thing. Our lost consumer hours were about 235 compared to our 5-year average of 890. Number of outages was 29 compared to 5-year average of 34. Really a pretty quiet month. And if you look at the causes, Trees not in the right of way has definitely been one of those things where we're seeing stuff come out due to wind. There was really two major wind events, one really being on February 27th, which is the last time we were here. That's what I was saying. The time we're in here, it seems like we get weather. So last time we were in here, we did have some wind, did knock over some trees. We have stressed to our contractor to make sure that we are looking for danger trees outside of our right of ways and that we let us know that the whole process and the way the contract is wrote is they're supposed to look for them. If they find them, they'll let us know. We give them the okay to go ahead and cut those. They only cut them to the point where they'll miss our lines. The member would be responsible for cleaning it up. But those are really kind of unbudgeted dollars, right? A lot of times we'll have our hot spotting crew do that. So it doesn't really increase our budget depending on how many we get at one point.
For your definition, are the days
Dead.
dead?
Yeah, primarily it's the ash. And I've been telling people, and I appreciate if you guys get the word out too, that if people see them, call them in. If you see something that looks like it's gonna hit the lines and it's dead, call them in to our front folks up front. They'll create a tree ticket. Our tree guys will go out and take a look at it. Again, even if it's, a tree that's 20 feet from the line is out of our right of way. But as long as the member's okay with it, which typically they are, it's dead, right? We will top it to make sure that it misses the line. But then the member would be responsible for the rest of it. This isn't bad, but it's definitely a spike. It's probably due to the wind and obviously we're getting more rain, so don't look for it getting better. Any questions from a metric standpoint? Here you go, Matt.
Yeah, you're up.
The balance sheet, you have that in your packet. They're really my usual commentary thing. There's nothing over 5% change or $250,000. I mean, there's not a lot of huge changes between January and February. Any questions on the balance sheet? Next, our statement of operations. The main thing I would say here is we have billing and member service expenses higher because where wages were allocated at the beginning of the year with our employees moving around, people are still in billing and member services, training new people. And also the other thing is maintenance is lower because we're not as far along in the right of way. And also operations and maintenance are a tick lower. That's not a huge portion of it, but the guys have replaced a lot of poles. So their wages are getting capitalized.
So that overage, Matt, for the year will decline. It won't go away. It shouldn't grow once.
It
might for a short period of time.
It'll probably grow another month
And then
maybe two.
Then it should.
Then it should
level off.
level off. Yeah.
Our plan right now for completing transitions, and again, this is our plan, Crystal can probably add if we're on track to that, but it's April 4th. So April 4th was kind of the idea of having everybody in the right departments trained up.
We would experience this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which honestly, Dale, it looks like you're out of budget, but it's really just where people right now and hours. In total, we're well within.
I mean, on the year to date, the controllable expenses are under by 120. And that is mainly due to the right of way. We take right of way and we divide it by 12.
Yeah.
And then some of it also is, like I said, the guys are capitalizing some more of their time because they have to replace a lot of poles. Everything else, I mean, there's not really much else to say. The power cost is higher because the power tractor is still following behind it. It's like a stair step up. Any other questions on the operations statement? Cash flow, we have $250,000 increase in cash for the month. Typically our cash goes up in February because we're collecting more with it being winter. And we're not doing as much with it being winter. Any questions?
So I have a general comment about cash flow from a budget perspective. So as we just heard tonight, we do expect that the board will approve capital credit retirements in 2023 from Hoosier. The regular one as well as the special. Those are both subject to RUS approval because Hoosier borrows money from RUS. However, the timing of that money is going to be different this year than it was in 2022. So in 2022, part of our mitigation strategy for the escalation in costs was to get that money to member systems sooner. So last year we had most of that money by June. We retired. REMC actually paid out the retirements that we were going to issue with that money in July.
Yeah.
This year, we should get from Hoosier 668,000 about. That money is not going to hit our bank account until November.
Holding our money longer.
In our budget, it clearly says that we intend to return every dollar of that to the members this year. In addition to 556,000 of Decatur County REMC capital credits for a total of about 1.2 million. So if you were planning on having that 600 and change from Hoosier to make that payment, you're not going to have it if you want to do a July retirement.
Well, that's how the budget was originally set up, yeah.
You were expecting you were going to get that earlier in the year. That's why I'm telling you now. I just found this out at the meeting yesterday. So expect that. And I'm saying if RUS approves that, which typically there's no reason they won't probably, but as long as RUS approves that, that money will not be returned until November.
So we won't be able to count on that money till the end of the year.
Correct.
All right.
Does the board, did you guys have any feedback as far as like when we wanted to retire? Crystal, when do we normally?
July.
Yeah.
So we normally do in July. Is anybody against moving that out? If the time comes, we don't need to make a decision tonight. I'm just saying, if the time comes where we get crunched on cash, do we want to move it out?
Move it back a little bit.
And we can wait.
I guess we can wait and see what
Yeah.
the numbers.
Well, I just want you all to be aware of that. That's coming.
Sure.
So you won't have that money in July.
Yeah, that's a significant amount of money.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, 1.2 million for us to retire this year is like one of the all-time highs.
Yes, that's right.
And we did clearly say in the budget that we were returning all of the Hoosier capital credits this year.
Yes.
So
All right. Well, I will keep that in mind.
that's for your information.
Are you finished, Matt, or are you going to go through plan investments?
I can. Here's the plant. In general, this is the regular slides. We got the distribution work plan projects. That money is, and I didn't change the thing at the top to say February. That's the sell of the wire, new services. That is what it is. Meters and transformers. We've gotten in a lot of transformers. I think the pole replacements, G2, G4, G6, that's the carryover stuff from the prior year. The 80,000, the red tag Westport is what the guys have done. Let's see. In general, I do have one thing on here that now that jogged my memory with the meters and transformers. We need to order another 2,500 kVA transformer, and they're like 140 grand, roughly 130, 140 grand, because we used our spare at New Point, and it's about an 18-month lead time they're figuring yet to get those. So if we order it today, we're not going to get it till the end of 24. We have one on order currently for the digester that'll cover that, but then we're going to have a stretch in time there where we need to order one.
Is it the same location we had the problem with the other one and you got it just happened to show up that week? And
Well, the digester's gonna take a big one, and it's on order.
yeah, but I mean in New Point.
It's already been done.
It's already there.
But prior to this, we had one
That was it.
So this is
Yeah.
the same location. We've lost two of these now.
No, you're talking about the 1,000 that blew up.
Okay.
That wasn't a 2,500.
Okay.
But if we order it now, we're not gonna get it till next year. It's not gonna impact this year's budget, but that's a lot of money and I figured it didn't hurt to ask to make sure nobody had an issue ordering that because
No, that we need to give us, you guys.
Is everybody okay with that? I mean, we could,
It's definitely going to put you over to the,
well, it's gonna be next year.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's not this year's budget.
Then 24.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be late 24 till
we
we
ain't
get
gonna
it.
get it this year.
So, but the one went out the door, we didn't expect to be that big. Which is why historically we've tried to keep, from what I've been talking to Eric and in the back there, the goal is to have a spare, and then if you place it, you go order another one. So, but that's a lot of money, so.
so everybody's okay with the order going through? Okay, see my hands nod.
Where I was going on the closed action items, and maybe I missed it, start listing actual poles replaced each month internally and externally. So internally would be our guys, external would be contractors. We just, again,
And this is all our guys so far,
but can you put the number of poles?
that,
I can report that out.
yeah.
Yeah, well, we hit it as a closed action item and I didn't.
And I think when we talked about, you have it,
78.
78.
That's phenomenal.
Okay,
Kudos to the teams.
yes. And that may not be reflected all the money yet until everything's closed. That's their count that they have done till everything flows through from a,
Well, that should be the number you gave out last month, which was 40 something.
what,
The February financial should be the poll numbers that was told last month with, I think that was 47 or something.
yeah, probably, yeah.
Yeah.
That should be pretty close, yeah. Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, it won't be exact, but it's pretty close. There is a little bit of a variance there. But yeah, there'll be a bunch more money to come hit that here for this month too.
So is the pole replacement information there that I see? Everybody's good with that? Because I thought there was a question earlier this evening and I want to make sure we got clarity on it.
The question earlier was there was zero budgeted for the 2022 replacement and we've spent.
And that was carried over from last year.
That's what I'm saying. I just want to make sure that issue's closed.
It was approved in 20.
And there's not too many more polls to hit that. I don't believe. I think I got a paper. I got it before I got sick. I'm trying to remember exactly. I think there was like 8 maybe. I can't sure, but there shouldn't be too much more in that. I don't believe. Any other questions on the plant?
Everybody good?
Good, man. Yeah. Any other questions on anything?
I think we're good to go. Thanks. Next item on the agenda, company goals. This was brought to our attention last month. I think we had a couple, 3 or 4 additions that were placed toward the bottom. And looking for approval of your 2023 goals. Again, I think the only change that was made from last month was reported this month in the 3 items at the bottom.
The third item down, is that Is that supposed to say 2022 budget or should that say 2023 budget?
Third item.
Implement 2022 budget, approved plan improvement projects.
23.
That should say 23, then the one below that
Below it, yeah.
should say 22, correct?
Yep.
Okay. So that first item in the reliability should be 2020.
Yes.
Okay, so that's,
Wait a minute. So implement the 2022 budget approved plant improvement projects. Those are the ones that were approved and carried over from last year. So they are 2022 because we don't have any plant projects in our.
Okay.
That is right.
so it's good as is.
Yes.
Okay,
My bad.
all right, so we're.
And then the one under it, you said?
Well, that one we know should be 22.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. I'm fine to make a motion to
Approve the goal.
approve these goals or
Okay. Do it first.
Second.
Move second. Any additional discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, the same. All right. Those are goals. This is the tariff change that Crystal's going to go over. Which I did, sorry. Stuck together.
It's deep.
Yeah, I think when we start on, I mean, there's several policy changes. If we can combine a couple for approval, once, we want to do that, or if we see the need to do it just as a separate policy, we'll go that route. So it doesn't mean we'll try to do them all in one motion. All right, go ahead. Christie.
So when we updated the rates last month with this tariff, we did not look past the rate number. And I noticed when I was going in to do some of the testing that the power factor adjustment section was not changed to reflect the large commercial language. So we should have updated that last month when we came and brought the rate change information. So it's just cleaning this piece up and taking out that they have to be at 97% and all of the power factor pieces. So this language just matches exactly to what large commercial is, which is what they're gonna be on in a few years. So nothing major, just we should have caught that last month, but we
It's got to mirror large commercials, the whole idea.
Yep.
If everybody's good with that, I think we'll just go to the second one. Now's the time for any questions or if you have any on that. Change, okay. So let's go to the next item.
All the rest of these all the rest of them, contributions to aid that thing. The only reason they came up is because they came up in our system that we need to get it reviewed, right? So we want to try to review all of our policies at a pretty good.
Right, I know.
So for this first one, really the only change Jeannie added in here was the overtime work must be approved per supervisor beforehand. All time off in lieu of overtime must be approved. This is sort of what we do today, but we thought it was important to go ahead since we're updating the policy to add that in there.
On the contribution and aid, last month you had mentioned 19 were already completed. I believe the number was 19.
Okay.
They will get this $500 off.
That's totally up to you guys. If you want to backdate it, you definitely can.
19 pulled up.
Yeah, that's what you said last month, that 19 of those have been replaced.
I don't know if they're all pull tops, but I know there are a few, yes.
I just want to make sure that we're consistent.
Yep.
You mean including that 500?
Yes, that
For those,
because they got theirs done early, they shouldn't be done.
I 100% agree.
Retroactive.
Just make it, we can make it retroactive to,
A certain date when you
Is there
start.
any in December?
I don't know, Jeff. I know there's been a couple, yeah.
I just want to make sure everybody,
Some last year.
yes, they should get it.
I agree.
How far back do we?
Well, we just started this thing. I don't know how long ago you,
I have an email that we talked about in August, so why I'm like not really sure why there's just now this. But there's been people that have that noted on the spreadsheet that they are gonna get that $500 credit.
so we'll just.
So I mean,
backdate it.
if we've told the member they're gonna get it, they need to get it.
100% agree. I
So,
didn't know that we told
but
them.
I think that I think that it was in the fall. When we started,
Didn't we take action on this?
No, because this wasn't the change.
But we talked about it.
Correct.
We talked, but we didn't.
We wanted-
some kind of.
I think we just didn't have a policy for it.
Right, we didn't have a policy to create consistency.
Yeah,
We were just doing away with the old policy
So
and nothing to go forward.
We talked about it, that's when it should be.
Yes, agreed.
I just get back to all of the ones that when we started the pull top switch or the meter project. I mean, we could go back and look at the exact dates.
Well, that's what I think you need to try to find.
Yeah.
I have the email. We can go back.
Back to that date.
I think it was August, but I have the exact date of when we talked about it. And we started documenting it on the service orders that Jim was telling the members they were gonna get the fire.
So why wouldn't we just do it back to all the original pulls when we started the meter pull project? I mean, we have a
Some of
list.
them might have gotten a transfer switch when we still had them.
Yeah, but we've got record of that. Don't we?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know what you guys keep whenever there's an MR created for that. We don't track it on billing.
Got it.
I think it just needs to go to the point that we started telling people, this is what
So
you're gonna
when
get.
any one of them that Jim would have hit.
And we have that documented.
Exactly.
Yes.
From that date.
Yeah.
Yes.
There is a date from when we started with the contract review, so we can go back to that.
So do we need to incorporate that into the policy? I don't think so.
No.
It doesn't say specific.
I mean, does everybody agree to go back? It's not gonna be that much.
Go back to August.
I'll make the motion to go back to August and approve this.
But what if there's some before?
There shouldn't have been.
Just go back to, make it to the date of the email, because I have the email that states
Of where we
when
started?
we were gonna start doing it.
Because prior to that, we would have replaced the pole or not.
No, not in all cases.
We would have probably given them a
We
transfer.
would have given them a transfer.
The
switch.
dollar transfer switch.
Yeah, They would have gotten a transfer switch instead of having to pay for transfer.
But if they were to bring the transfer switch back,
Yeah, but now they've already paid the electrician and like there's,
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably was,
Probably not gonna switch it.
yeah.
If you guys want, we can investigate, like, is there a clear cutoff and I can send you
And
guys.
see what numbers we're.
I mean, does everybody agree that we want to go back?
yes.
Yes.
I think if you approve the policy, we'll figure out a clear way to do it and I'll send you all an email.
Okay. Are we good with that?
So real quick on that, just so it's on record here, so everyone understands. The past practice, which has not been policy, it's just the way that it's essentially the way that we've always done it, is that anytime you get rid of a pull top switch, we've always given them a transfer switch, right? For $1. That's the incentive to get rid of the pull top switch. Well, transfer switches are becoming very, very hard to get, and not every member needs a transfer switch. Some people see these pull top switches and they're like, I don't even need it there anymore. I don't need any isolation at all. So we wanted to incentivize everybody the same. So if you go back and you look at the cost of a transfer switch, it's very close to the $500 that we said we were going to invoice. But please remember that if you approve this policy, there will be members that are going to get a new service, which cost is under the $1,600 that we give them for a new service. So we're going to send them a $500 check. So they're getting a new service and we're sending them a $500 check. I just want everybody to be clear, because that's something that the team, when we met on this, we went back and forth on, does that make sense? Does it not make sense? Well, I think it does because it's fair to everyone. If we're incentivizing to get rid of a pull top switch, then it should be equal across everyone. But you will be. Someone will get a check for $500 for getting a new service and they got rid of a pull top switch.
But that's not gonna be.
Not gonna be the norm.
No. That many.
But I know of two already that will get checks sent to them. In other words, we went in, put a brand new service in for them, and they're gonna get a $500 check sent to them.
But why?
Because we're incentivizing getting rid of a pull top switch.
So you're getting rid of it.
There was a pull-top switch there.
There was a pull top.
Inactive service.
No.
Active.
Active.
But they decided to make it inactive?
Well,
No, they're just changing their service to take down that pull top switch so that
Let's-
they no longer have it.
Let's say you got a house right now that has a pull top switch. It goes to the house, it goes to the barn. They're putting in a new house or something, right? Or they're wanting to bury their lines, whatever. So they're doing it on, we're gonna come in and we're gonna put a new service in, right? So there's the one case I'm talking about, let me back up here. The old barn and house that the person lived in had a pull top switch. They're moving house over here. So essentially it's a brand new service. So they're gonna get a $1,600 credit, just like anyone would, right? To drop the new service to that house. He's getting rid of this pull top switch. So he's gonna get a $500 check for getting a brand new service. He got rid of a pole and a pull top switch. But I just want to be clear that that's the scenario here, which I think is fine. It's the conversation we went to is you don't want to not incentivize somebody that was proactive of getting rid of a piece of equipment that we own. It's a safety liability. You can't get parts for pull top switches anymore.
Well, it says right here, the incentive of this policy is to remove pull top switches from our system.
Correct. Period. Doesn't matter how you do it. I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. And I don't think it's going to be the norm at all, but we've had two so far.
so what if we have an inactive service that has a pull top switch and we remove the service?
That doesn't, I think, didn't we put that in the policy? That doesn't count.
Okay, because I know there's,
Check that out though, because I think.
Letter C, credit does not apply to an account where we're retiring the service only.
Perfect.
thank you.
We didn't think that was fair.
I agree. Getting rid of it, we shouldn't pay it.
I honestly don't think there's gonna be a ton of these. You know,
Well, and they're gonna have a significant amount of money when they bury stuff themselves too.
correct.
I know when I got rid of my pull top switch and buried everything, it wasn't super cheap.
You may move down to C. We hit B. C is literally just a grammar thing. We just added. So energy efficiency, that is one that has not been looked at for a long time. And so with Touchstone Energy, that's what drove a lot of these, and we don't do those anymore. So we thought, let's get rid of it in the policy because we don't do those anymore. That's what drove the whole update. I mean, if you guys look at this, it hadn't been updated since 2014. And we don't do the Touchstone Energy home houses anymore. We don't have a energy audit person here hired. That's what drove those changes. Then membership of other organizations. Again, this one hasn't been reviewed in forever. The only thing we changed, if you look at the Chamber of Commerce, the old policy said Greensburg, Ripley, Jennings. And this new policy, we said participate actively in a minimum of one. And we thought we would kind of, like terms that you're on that board, we could switch to different counties, the different terms that we're on. It gets expensive, number one, and it's very, very time consuming to try to hit all three at one time. And then the director of education was one that you wanted to.
Right, because I think we met the obligation of directors that were still, that hadn't completed. I also wanted to iterate at this point in time, it's a good time to review this. We will be this summer going over to see if we met our obligations for the year to support this policy. So take a look at what you need to be doing. So those are all the red line changes. I think, it looks like there's a lot, but I think Brett went through well. So
There's only a few more that we have that haven't been reviewed since like 14.
Okay,
So we're getting close.
yeah. So I'll take a motion to approve all of the changes that are included here.
I'll move.
Right, we have a first.
I'll second.
And a second. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, the same. All right, so the changes are good to go. All right, there's several articles that have been passed our way. I thought we could take a minute to kind of go through each one of them, see if there's any questions or comments that I really want to share.
You know, I read a ton of articles during the year or during a week. And so I'm going to try to get you guys the best ones that I find. And that was kind of the whole idea.
Okay.
I don't know. The only thing I would say is on the third one down with that notice, we did contact, and this isn't going to be a huge load change type scenario. Maybe a few hours here and there, but they're not projecting anything huge that we'll actually notice.
Isn't there information, I mean, we talked about it at a previous board meeting regarding the number of EVs that we have in the county. Do we have an idea of how?
I can't remember the number, but I
Okay.
believe it was like 15, 16 in the county. But you don't know, the problem with the way that report is out, it's done by the BMV and they don't tell you, I don't have any idea out of those 15, how many are on our lines and how many are on Duke's line.
Okay.
That's the only bad thing about that. Now, they have legislative in right now for reporting requirements of an EV, and part of that is going to help us.
Okay. We don't really know how many charging at home in the next article, right? So.
They're throwing a lot of money at this, and I mean, you look at the supply chains of the major automotives. I believe this is starting to change from everyone said that it was gonna be cost effective. You know, EV prices were gonna come down. I believe what you're gonna end up seeing is the opposite's gonna happen, right? So, well, no, EV costs are gonna come down, but I think the supply chains and everything, I think it's gonna be hard to get the prices for, I don't know. If anybody knows the answer to this, I'd be.
Is the electrical industry ready for this if it does take off? We've already got the birds of brownouts and blackouts, and now everybody's gonna be, if there's as much. And then we're gonna, we're closing down coal plants. So are they ready for this, or they got the cart before the horse?
Well, and I thought in the home charging article, it was talking about that, if everybody had an EV and everybody went to work and then decided they were going to go home and plug in at 4:30 or 5 o'clock or 5:30, it's going to be an issue. There's real education that's going to have to take place if and when this does take hold. Because it's not just as simple as go home and plug it in.
There's a lot of discussion about this topic in Nashville at the annual meeting, and we will eventually have to develop a time of use rate. We will have to have the technology and the metering capabilities to control people's chargers in their homes, and we will have to incentivize it. Now, I'm not saying maybe specifically Decatur County or AMC, but grid wide, it's coming, and we're going to have to be prepared to deal with it, because you're absolutely right. We can't handle that right now. If everybody, like Dale said, come home at 5:30 plugs in, that's a real problem. That won't work.
Oh, and you're hitting peak.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
The cost to do nothing eventually is going to be very expensive for the rest of the members that don't have EV. We don't do, eventually, this is,
Right.
who knows?
And here's the concept I'd like somebody to explain to me, because I sure can't figure it out. As you drive an automobile now, you have gas stations how often? that you can stop at this one, you can stop at that one, you can stop at the next one. Are charging stations going to be as plentiful? I mean, eventually maybe, but initially they're going to be at intervals of so far. So you're going to have people stopping at the same one all the way across the nation.
Liquefied natural gas place. You can stop here 50 miles down the road.
Yeah.
So that grant, and it's billions with the B, from the federal government that's getting handed over to the states, and the states have to create a plan. That money's already out there. I mean, I can tell you there's going to be one by Walmart. It's not on our system. There's going to be one every, I can't remember if it's 20 or 25 miles.
Yeah, but
Out in the state of Indiana.
stop and think of the frequency if you see a gas station right now.
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah, no, I get
I
it.
mean, it's a lot more frequent than every 25 miles. Because everybody's not going to plug in at the same time in the same interval.
We all know it's in the future. No one knows when.
Any other comments about the 4 different articles that were presented to us?
Have to have a gas powered generator, truck to plug it in.
All right, let's go to Jason, you're up with Hoosier.
No hometown?
There's no hometown.
There's nothing.
Nothing going on. There was a finance and audit committee meeting that I participated in this week. You got the presentation from Rob and Donna tonight, talked about the 5% increase we're going to see through the tracker, which is kind of all new. We also executed 2 capacity agreements, and interestingly enough, Matt, those facilities are in the state of Illinois. But they are expiring in such a time frame that the 2030 and 2045 deadline are not going to be a factor. But we did execute 2 capacity agreements to fill some of those seasonal buckets in 2025 and 2026. There was also a Hoosier board meeting this week. I told you about the capital credits. The other noteworthy item that came out of that meeting is we've been discussing for almost 2 years now, the idea of member flexibility. I think I've talked to you guys about it. It's been in the board packet and the meeting minutes from Hoosier. Basically, we've, I think, got that boiled down to a small exception in the wholesale power contract. Right now, that's looking like that's going to total 5%. So what does that mean? That means that a distribution co-op will be able to own generation or do something behind the meter maybe to manage peak, or a member would have the flexibility to do that kind of stuff. But anyway, right now we're an all requirements contract. I think there's a 1% provision in there currently, and it sounds like the appetite of the board is that that's probably going to go to 5%. And that's just to give some distribution co-ops some leeway to do some R&D stuff on their side of the meter that they're asking for. So that's not official yet, but that could be. And Brett and I talked about it a little bit on the way back. I don't know that Decatur County per se is in a position that we are that interested in that at this point, but who knows? Maybe eventually as technology develops, we will be. So
Back to shape peak.
yeah. Remember that battery we were always talking about? Maybe.
We just got to operate it.
That's it from Hoosier.
Okay, and there's nothing to report from the IC board. So we'll go to the next item. Director training, are there any conferences that were attended?
I did go to NRECA in Nashville. I talked a little bit about that a minute ago. I'm not going to go through a long list of stuff, but I'm going to hit a couple highlight things. There were over 10,000 people in attendance at the conference, and over 80% of REMCs in the United States were represented there with voting delegates. I did vote on your behalf as you elected me to. all the resolutions passed. There are two that are noteworthy enough that were taken. Usually they pass those all in big wads. There were two that were pulled out for debate. One was NRECA's support of the Keystone Pipeline. The membership wants NRECA to get behind that and get that back open. That did pass after some lengthy debate. That was one. And then the exploration of hydro facilities on the Mississippi River. So that was something new that came up that the resolutions committee brought before the assembly and asked RECA get involved in that. That would primarily be in the northern Midwest. I did take 2 BLC courses and you know, when you go to those kind of events, they're huge. So when you go to like those smaller things and you've got a smaller sample set of people to talk to, this guy one was from a system in Oregon, and obviously they have a lot of hydropower there, and we all think hydropower is cheap and it's renewable and it's great, but there's a movement out west to stop some of the hydropower because the salmon are not able to navigate the dams and people are not able to fish. So, you know, we're talking about $78 and $80 a megawatt. They're 30. You know, that's, and 1/3 of that cost is just repopulating the fish. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. One of the things I did go to is talk a lot about broadband. And, you know, as we've been talking about that, FCC now defines broadband as 25 down and 3 up. And it sounds like that's going to change to 100 down and 25 up. Why is that significant? That means that folks in our service territory that are doing line of sight stuff will probably not qualify as broadband providers anymore if that goes through. So that's coming. I think that's about it. And I saw the first all-electric bucket truck. It'll go 130 miles.
Cost?
An hour?
Cost?
We didn't get that far. I asked him, I said, is this like the farm machinery show? You don't want to take that home? We can buy it cheaper off the floor. He just laughed at me. He said, yeah, this really isn't for sale. But they literally turned the differential around backwards on the rear axle, and there's a big electric motor that just turns the differential. That's how they drive it. But he said there are a couple of munis that have them. They're starting to get out. He said the guys love them because there's no noise. And they're fast. They can hear what's going on the ground. The ground crew can talk to the guy up in the bucket. So, I don't know. We'll see.
Better batteries, key to everything.
Yeah, the technology, to Clay's point, I think some of this is a little cart before the horse. But as technology gets better, we may have more of that kind of stuff. The Tech Advantage show down there was very impressive. The equipment, the drones, they're doing a tremendous amount of work with drones and right of way and saws on drones. And it's nuts. It's crazy. I don't know what any of that stuff costs, but it was pretty impressive. So anyway.
All right. Anybody else attending? No?
I have something, Steve. Can we elaborate on the member access to the mailing list? Because I was not really clear of what.
Let's hold off on that. We can potentially maybe do it under our other discussion.
Okay.
Because we're talking about conferences, Crystal has an ask that I wanted her to go ahead and bring to our attention.
Yeah, I'm sorry it wasn't on the agenda. It kind of got off track. I know. Wasn't my fault. No, just kidding. So we budgeted this year for camp and youth tour students. We did 4 youth tour students and we did 5 campers. I'm sure all of you have seen all the advertisements where we've done tons of marketing around the youth programs, December, January, and February. So we ended up getting 7 campers that signed up, which is crazy because we never get that many. We usually get like 2 if we're lucky. So we're really excited to get 7. So we will be sending all 7 because it's only $300 to send the others. So we can pull that from somewhere else. And and get all 7 kids to be able to experience camp. Youth tour, on the other hand, is a little bit more pricey. So we budgeted for 4, we had 8 apply. So we're coming to you guys. How do you want us to handle that? Do you want us to just say we're only going to do the 4 that we budgeted for this year with the intent to increase the budget for next year since we have so much participation? Or can we ask to send some of them and just ask for additional funding, send them all? It's a lot different than what it was. So in 2022, we had 2 apply. We only sent 1, which I'm not sure why, but that's what we did. 21 and 20 obviously was COVID year, so nobody was able to go, but we did have 6 apply in 2020. They just didn't get to attend. And then in 2019, we had 4 apply and we sent all 4. So having 8 it's a huge thing, but kind of up to you guys of what you want to do. It's $8,000 to send the additional 4, so it's
roughly 2,000 apiece.
it's pretty costly. So, we support whatever you guys want to do, but we didn't want to just go ahead and select 4 students without asking first if, maybe we could send a couple of more, or if not, that's completely fine. But we would probably ask for more next year in the budget. We are marketing it so heavily.
Crystal,
Oh, go ahead, Dale.
if we stay with just the 4, is there some sort of criteria that's objective that you can in fact make that?
That's what we're gonna have to, because we don't have a process right now because we've not had this many apply. So my thought was we're just gonna have to pull them out of a hat because we have really great candidates. There are candidates that are top of their class that are be fantastic students. But then there's also kids that maybe they're not quite as good on the grades, but it's an opportunity that they'll probably never get to go on their own. So it's kind of for us to say, look at this name, look at this application. It's going to be very hard to say, well, we think you can go and we think that you don't. So my suggestion was put them all in a hat and draw them out, because then there's not any, oh, maybe I know this person or I know this person, and I'm not leaning more into that. But next year we do want to have an actual process. So Carol White and Titmont both have an interview process where they have an outline that they follow. And they actually bring every single kid in and they have a committee and they interview the kids, because maybe on paper they look great, but then when you interview them, it's not so great. But then also vice versa. Maybe they interview fantastic, but they're not so great on paper. So by next year, we will have an actual process that we'll follow, where we're going to bring them all in. So whoever we select, we're going to bring them all in for kind of a meet and greet of the co-op so that they can actually get to meet us. If anybody signs up to chaperone, which I don't think we have anyone yet for youth tour, but camp is full. So we will have a better process next year. It's all kind of new for.
I have 2 questions. The second one, I'm going to put you on the spot, so I'm going to ask you for your recommendation if you have one. But could you partially fund all 8 of them as opposed to fully fund 4 of them? Would that be an option, or is that create more issues than it's worth?
Yeah, I kind of feel,
Okay.
my opinion is, I think it's a fantastic opportunity, and I know it's $8,000, but we spend money on things that cost way more than that don't benefit the youth of the community. So my recommendation would be to sponsor all of them so that we don't have to pick and choose, and then know that going into next year, we have a process, we have a plan, and if we get 10, this is our limit, and we're going to go through this process, and this is what it's going to be.
So if we did that, the additional ask is
8,000.
additional 8,000.
Yeah, to send 4 more kids.
Is it too late to go through that process now?
It is, because the deadline to tell everyone is next Friday, the 30th.
Just curious.
Yeah, unfortunately,
So could you use some of the community trust funds that would be distributed in the second half of the year?
I don't think so, because I think that's all, it's a separate,
There's bylaws.
yeah, they have like their
for
own,
that.
I don't think you could.
Probably ask.
We would have to, yeah, we would have to like apply and say, hey, we want to do that. separate.
You're thinking more of like a lottery system for this year and sticking with the budget, and then next year have an interview process.
I think that's the best way to do it. I mean, if you have enough people,
I think so too.
that's the best way.
It's the most objective, least subjective
Yes.
process.
Yeah.
Under the circumstance.
And when those things were coming through, I was getting emails and I was like, oh my gosh, like we had like 4 in one day. And I was like, these people are super excited. And they are. I mean, even the little campers, I know they're only 6th grade going into 7th grade, but when we went and did the presentation at the school, like they're so excited. They were so excited. So we showed them the video and their biggest thing was, can I take my cell phone? No. Leave your cell phone out. Which is a totally different atmosphere for them.
That screened any of them out. We did that call for.
It might have. It might have. Oh, and then one wanted to know if he could bring his own gun to shoot for the riflery. We're like, keep all your things at home. But it's up to you guys. We just wanted to bring it and not just say, we're only going to do the 4 and move on.
Thoughts? Then I thought I heard you say something a little bit earlier, was like using the lottery.
The lottery system this year, it was too late to do the interview.
So everybody wants to leave it as is, and so what I'm hearing. Yes.
I think that makes most sense. I think you need to find the most equitable, least subjective manner to select the 4.
Yep.
And if that's straws, ping pong ball, whatever. That's how they announce the semi-states in basketball.
Yep.
Ping pong balls, so.
Yep.
All right,
Perfect. Thank you.
thank you. Okay, Carl, you had a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to elaborate on the member access, the mailing list, and or was that the whole process that was on the iPad or?
Yes.
So there was 3 votes this month on the iPad. Those will all be recorded in the minutes for next month.
They should be, yes, they need to be.
Since we're talking about that, can I just ask a general question? Why is the policy that if one person votes no, it's dead since it's, I don't understand. Where did that come from and why is that?
I can't remember if it was legal's recommendation at one time when all the,
Yeah. I mean, does that make sense to everyone?
So if it's a verbal, if we're on the phone talking,
It's not that
it's
way.
not, but as typing on
Yeah.
a text or an
Does
email.
that make sense to everyone?
I just knew, I've been told it's a policy. That's just the policy.
Can we find out when it originated and why?
Yeah, I could go
That you're asking, right?
Yeah, I mean, if everyone else is as confused by that as I am, I don't see why we don't change the policy.
I could dig in and find out when it got actually changed, because I have no idea.
yeah, and maybe legal's recommendation would be something different today.
I think what legal's gonna tell you, honestly, if you ask them, they're gonna say that the whole point of a board in making decisions is to discuss, debate, and that's not. But that's what they're gonna tell
Or
you.
you can over the phone.
It's probably the most conservative approach to taking action because of that very point. Whereas, yeah, to Suzanne, over the phone, you can have discussion, conjecture where you can't do that electronically.
Not easily. That's it. You just wait for someone to say no and you're not heard of it. So, which I don't know if that's really the
You don't have
right.
to read it.
I don't know if that's really the right thing to do.
You have to read it. You
So from now on, the first person, if you're gonna be a dissenting vote, be the first person.
Go right away.
Save us time. Just save us time. Say no and
Go right away.
Honestly, I think it was meant for like things that are just. I'll go back and research it though, because I honestly don't know when it was. My guess is it's been like that forever.
Well, yeah, I don't. All right, the next item, legal matters. Brian Garrison was here last month. and presented to the board some findings. And there was, I believe, a question asked. I know a comment that he made was that as a board, you can discuss to going ahead and make this information available. And so I'm asking for the board to discuss that possibility if that's what we want to consider doing.
Define available. You mean not confidential?
Not confidential. In other words, if a member asks about it because they're kind of aware of the situation, then by all means, it's,
What's the point of the whistleblower policy then that states in there that it's confidential? Doesn't the whistleblower,
remember that we talked through that before, that information got out, and it probably should never have gotten out, but it did.
But the actual whistleblower is still anonymous.
Has never been identified.
That's the protection that the whistleblower policy affords, is anonymity, which has not been breached.
am I missing something or is there a discussion?
What's that, Clay?
Am I missing something or sounds like there's not discussion really, is there?
I guess I can.
What are you saying?
I'm asking if the board would like to consider that as an option. Making that information, I used the term available. What word did you?
I said, I asked you if that meant non-confidential. I don't know if that's the right.
So if that were the action, so would it become available in minutes, or how would available be attained, I guess is.
Well, that's, I guess, it's a discussion that.
I don't really think that I think it's more of someone asks you about it and you.
I don't think it's a publication.
I don't think it's going to benefit our members to find out that information. I don't think it's beneficial for them. You know, if I thought it was beneficial for our members to know. Are you just saying in general discussion, you're not saying to publicize it or publicate? You mean
No, I'm not.
make an article about it? You're just saying,
Yeah. Because Brian did say we could have that discussion and decision is.
I don't think we would go through the efforts of publicizing it. That being said, it's already been quasi-published. That became evident at previous meetings. So if we don't take any action, and as directors, we're asked about it, we allowed to discuss it as it stands right now, or not allowed to discuss it? I guess that's my question.
I got the information that we weren't really allowed to discuss it unless we as a group decided that
it was okay.
Yeah.
My opinion, whether it's this whistleblower or anybody in the future, a whistleblower in the future, that's the whole point of whistleblower.
Well, but again, the whistleblower's not been compromised. Right? I mean,
it's the information that's presented.
it's the fact that there was.
I mean, we do talk about transparency a lot in here.
Well, I've been asked about it a couple of times, and if you're not going to disclose anything, then I need to know that.
What is the harm in allowing directors to respond if they're addressed? I mean, not publicizing and not putting it out there, not disseminating it. But to Jason's point, what's the harm in him responding to an inquisition or inquiry about that? I've not had any, and I don't expect that I will have any.
And that's why I asked the question about the money. Because that was part of the ask. I mean, we spent members' money on this. How much did you spend and what did you find out? I mean, it's a pretty straightforward question.
Do we know that amount yet?
We don't have it yet. always ask to, yeah. And I believe to be transparent, Carl, what are you thinking? What are you thinking?
Well, if we're discussing something and we want to make it confidential, then every one of the board members needs to know it's going to be confidential, not discussed. Because there's been times I've left and I'm going, wait a minute, is this confidential? It's not confidential. I have no idea. So we got to set transparency. You got to tell them, you know, hey, let's go, that's this way. When we can change, you know, what is confidential, and what ain't confidential, is what we discussed, can we not?
But isn't that what kind of got us into trouble from?
Well, I mean, that's what we're talking about tonight, right? Can you talk about it or can't you? It's pretty straightforward.
Well, because obviously somebody has.
I need a motion if we want to continue. Vote on it.
Can we not just do it by consensus? Or you think we need a formal action?
Yeah, I think we need a formal one. Unless I see a bunch of heads nodding, and I haven't seen that.
I presume if acted upon, the response to the inquiry would still be very generic, very, I don't know how else to say it other than generic without divulging a lot of specifics. Is that a fair assessment?
I believe so. Anybody?
Or are we looking for a motion, Steve, or the question is a motion to whether or not to be able to respond to an inquiry? Is that what we're talking about? I mean, we're not talking about, I'm not in favor of the publication or disseminating.
Right.
But to Jason's point, I don't think it's appropriate to put a director or directors in an awkward position or a compromised positions because information has previously been compromised and shared when it shouldn't have been. It's out there.
Yeah, people can continue to ask, I think.
There are names involved in that, so I don't think that would be professional to just say, hey, here's a report, obviously.
Yeah.
But if you're questioned about it, I feel like you should at least be able to answer the question. I don't want to answer the question and then someone in here call me out. You talked about that and you shouldn't have. So I'm just trying to clarification. Because to Carl's point, sometimes we don't make that clear before we leave the room, and we probably should.
About the information or the cost that comes out. So that's basically saying we can't tell people that. Is that what everybody's saying too? Again, we're talking about transparency here. Should know all the dollars that are spent.
Well, we can't selectively be transparent.
Well,
It's a contradiction of terms.
I'm just gonna, I mean, I'll make a motion to say, yeah, you can respond if you're asked about it, and then just leave it at that. I don't know if that's too, I don't know. I don't think that report should be shared. Okay, but I don't want to be in the position where I can't tell you. We've all been, that's why some of us are sitting in here because we got those answers. I can't tell you.
What detail you gotta go? And where does it start and stop? I mean, it's a, can't put the genie back in the bottle and shoot, let her out. I'm saying
We have a first.
it, up a can of worms.
Will you restate your motion, Jason, please?
Well,
What did you exactly make motion? I'm kind
I'm
of,
not really sure what it is, to tell you the truth, Suzanne.
okay. I can't approve. Yeah, you don't know what it is.
Okay, how about this? That if we're asked about it, we can answer in general terms with no names.
Because we don't know any names other than Brian Garrison.
No, there are names in the report.
Did I miss the report?
No,
From last month.
Oh,
there's no reason to go into all that.
No.
I've not had anybody ask, other than in my mind, I think it was during executive session, so we don't all talk about it. So that's my answer. It was in executive sessions. We can't talk, so I haven't had anybody personally ask me. But I'm not saying I won't, but I have not.
Yeah.
So I haven't.
I don't think it's a big deal. I just would like clarification around it.
We have a first.
I'll second.
We have a second. So based upon the motion that was made, all in favor say aye. Opposed, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion does not pass. A second item, and I brought this up before. There was an email from legal on 12/16 of last year, representing a couple of directors. There were accusations that were made in that email. We've tried to talk through it a couple different times. I don't move forward. But I'm going to suggest to the board that those that were accused should be getting a copy of the email as well. If you want to go back to 12/6, you can find the email.
Well, 16, isn't it, Steve?
Yeah, 12/16, excuse me. I think I did say 12/6 at one time, 12/16.
My question, Steve, is who is our legal counsel? The board's legal counsel?
Jeff, we've talked through this.
I've never gotten an answer.
You've got the same answer that I think everybody else has.
Don't have legal counsel.
We have legal counsel.
No, we can hire attorneys, but this board doesn't have a legal counsel we can turn to. I believe the last attorney that's been approved was Don Wickens of Wickens and Wickens.
And we talked about that as well.
I would like to see us determine who our legal counsel is, at least. And then when we have legal matters, we have legal representation here.
So let me ask this question then, based upon those emails, are those moot points at this time?
The only thing that's not a moot point is who is our legal counsel. And I would like to see this board approve legal counsel, because I've been on the board 6 years and we've never done that.
So, Jeff, are you suggesting we should have one attorney on retainer regardless of what the issue is, and everything should be funneled through them before we decide to go out?
I did not say that.
Well,
I'm saying from a board standpoint,
Legal counsel.
who do we turn to for legal counsel?
I think it depends on the issue.
But we've never voted on any of those. We were told last month that that was a financial document.
I'm confused. Yeah, what was the financial document?
When there were specific questions asked about legal. Ryan stated he wasn't our legal counsel. Then I want to know who is. And I would like to think this board,
He said he's not on retainer. That's what his exact words were. He's
Part of
not
it
on
was
retainer.
the financial document that showed, I think Suzanne had requested it, the 3 different attorneys that would be used and what was their description to be used for. So I would like to be more definitive as a board and know who our legal counsel is and approve who our legal counsel is.
So as simple as approving those 3 names, depending on what the item and would that solve
I thought that's what you guys did.
That's what Brian Garrison told us.
just those 3 names that were listed?
Use those that would use who is the subject matter expert, whatever we're talking about, right? So we have 3 different ones.
Okay?
But point of clarification, if you approve 3 and you say this one is for this one is for this one is for this, and an issue comes up that's outside that scope, do you then have to bring this board back to authorize another attorney? And if you're going to specify this is approved, this is approved, this is approved, and here's their area of expertise, and you have an issue that comes up and it's not the 3, it's a 4th area, do we then have to reconvene and approve a 4th attorney to be able to engage them?
Chairman of the board knows what attorney to go to for what issues.
That's what Brian Garrison said when we met with him in his.
Yeah, that's that question.
That funnels through the chairman. None of us are calling up legal on our own behalf. That goes through the chairman.
And typically so for other co-ops, talk about like the board approving like one attorney, you're talking about an attorney on retainer. That's every board meeting notes. That's expensive. But that's how the policy reads. If you want one on retainer, you guys need to approve one for retainer. I wouldn't recommend it.
So let's go back to my request. I don't know if anybody had the opportunity to look at the email from 12/16 as a review. I'd like you guys to consider that as an option. And Jeff, I just wanted to ask the question one more time. Are you saying then those emails are no longer an issue? Is that what I heard you say?
I just want to know who our legal counsel is.
So you're,
And you're telling me all 3 of them are our legal counsel. So who is an employee, if they go through the whistleblower policy, who would they call?
I think that's actually supported in the policy. If you look in there, I mean, I think they can go through the chairman or
But they couldn't just call an attorney.
I don't believe, I have to go back and.
I think that needs to be reviewed then. I think it needs to be defined.
We just had.
It was on there tonight. Yeah.
This was just up for review. It's what we looked at.
The 116 service of, oh, wait a minute. No, that wasn't it. It's, I'm referring to he's referring to 116.
Well, and I think that needs to be redefined because that has a specific person and it refers to him or he.
So the way.
But yes, I'm saying at this point, that is a moot point, but I do want to know who our legal counsel is. And
So with that being said, being the chairman of the CEC, in order for me to get any legal counsel, would I have to go through the chairman of the board to even know who to talk to, or how's that work?
I wouldn't think you'd have to. If you're a
If
chairman,
it's the CEO of the RAMC, if they got a question about who gets paid for, why does it go through? I'm curious why it had to go through an attorney to find out if it's legal to pay him.
Did you get that information though?
What information?
Email?
From Aaron?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and does
That's
it?
fine. No, I'm glad, because before we leave here, the CC, I'm gonna ask that we go through this and make a decision this evening. But anyhow, that's between us, the CC,
I think as chairman, you have every right to go to those councils.
which is fine. That's why I was just, again, I'm assuming, but that's why I was asking, do I want to make sure, because I already
I think you did.
did. to make sure everything were on a few things here, but everybody on the CEC knew that that was going to be done.
All right, so again, if you look at the email, I've asked to recommend that those that have been accused. All right, seeing that there's no motion, does anyone have anything else? And Jeff, we can, I mean, I don't know, well, let's look at those policies a little bit closer, put it on for next month. Again, I mean.
Consultants and the attorney, legal counsel.
And we have had that discussion and we're done. Anything else from anyone? All right,
Okay.
we have a first and a second, meeting adjourned. Good evening, everyone. There's a little food left.